Want to turn your passion for drawing into a full-time career? Discover our courses at Brushcamp where you become a master in the realm of digital painting. Brushcamp offers tons of similar courses in illustration, 2D, 3D design. Level up your creativity with free knowledge and courses. Visit brushcamp.com today and explore endless possibilities.
Hello everyone, in today's lesson we will learn about how to create selections in Photoshop. Of course, there are many different selection tools. A selection is an area like this. I choose the marquee tool. It can create a rectangular or circular shape. When you click here to get closer, then we will see that a panel appears. The shortcut key for it is the letter M. It has this arrow. When I hold it for a while, it will give you up to 4 options. I usually use the rectangle to create squares, rectangles, and elliptical is used to create circles, ellipses. For example, now I'll create a square, rectangle. I just need to hold and drag it out. The selection is the area. You can see it has a continuous dashed line. This is the selection. Let me zoom out. This is the selection. The characteristic of the selection is, when I draw, it won't bleed outside. When using the brush to draw, it can't bleed outside. It allows me to draw hard edges, for example, some shapes like drawing portraits. Why do I see people can draw such crisp lines? They create a selection to draw, not just using the brush. To exit the selection, I will press Ctrl D. Now I will briefly talk about the selection tools. I use the marquee tool. This tool is used to create a selection with basic shapes, such as rectangles, circles. What are its characteristics? Let's find out together. Here, click on the tool. For example, I'll create a rectangle. When dragging, don't release the brush from the canvas. Hold the spacebar key, the longest key on the keyboard. Then you can move the selection. Do you see it? Press Ctrl D to exit the selection command. For anything related to selections that I forget, I can go to the Select menu. The Select menu is for selections. It will have various options. For example, the first one is Deselect, which means to remove the selection. Deselect is Ctrl D, I just mentioned it. For example, Inverse, which means to invert the selection. For example, now the selection I drew is inside here only. If I want to draw something outside of it, what should I do? I will use Inverse to reverse it. The shortcut is Ctrl+Shift-I. Or you can go to Select and click on Inverse. When you press it, it will reverse the selection. And now I can only fill outside of it. For example, I'll fill it with a different color for you to imagine. It only fills the outside area. This helps prevent the color from bleeding into the object, or to separate two areas from each other. Do you see it clearly? The selection part, you just need to pay attention to Inverse and just those two. Ctrl+D is to exit the selection area. Inverse is to reverse the selected area. Then you can start drawing. As for the ones below, we will explore them after. I have drawn some examples. How can we create a rectangle? How can we create a square? I still click on the marquee tool, but when I do this, it doesn't create a square. But if I hold down the Shift key, then it will create a square. Similarly with the circle and ellipse shapes, holding down the Shift key will make it a circle. There's one more thing when creating selection area. Pay attention to. On the toolbar for creating a selection area, when I choose any tool, pay attention, this is my tool, and the one next to it are its parameters. For example, the selection tool, I'm currently in the mode of normal. When I create a new selection, the old one will disappear. Normally, when creating a selection, if I want to add to the selection, hold down the Shift key, and you'll see a plus sign next to the cursor. But if I want to subtract from the selection, press Alt. To create these subtractive marks, in Photoshop, there's something special and quite interesting. When I want to add another element, I hold down the Shift key. But if I want to remove something, for example, remove a selection, I press Alt. I'm selecting that tool. Pressing the Alt key subtracts from the selection, so I can fine-tune the selection I like. For example, I usually select a square. I can select a circular area instead. Then I hold down the Shift key to create a circle. Then it will add to the selection area. To make it easier in the manipulation process, Ctrl-D to deselect. I usually choose this add mode. It means that when I create a selection like this, if I create another one, it automatically understands it as an addition. But if it's like this, it subtracts. This mark signifies subtraction. If I select this area, when I create a new one, it will automatically subtract. But if I select this intersecting point of both, it selects the intersection of both areas. Looking at the image, you can understand this too. I choose the add mode, addition. To remove, I press Alt to subtract. I can create another rectangular to create a selection area. How to create the desired selection area. Now let's move on to the next tool. This tool is more flexible. It's called the lasso tool. Its shortcut is L, and it's located below the marquee tool. Here at the bottom, the lasso tool. It has a curved shape like this. Press L to create. With this tool, you can create freeform shapes. I create up to the endpoint and then release the mouse button. It will create a selection area to add more. You can still do the same. Hold Shift to add more, and press Alt to subtract. And you can see it's exactly the same as above. You can see that beside it. For example, if I select this, it will automatically add it. And if I want to subtract, I'll use Alt to subtract. Depending on what I select, I'll use Alt. I'll create a lot of selection areas so that I can draw clouds like this. For example, they create selection areas like this. For example, now I created a selection area that's not quite right. I can hold Shift to redraw additional areas. If I leave it like this, it will automatically add it. Or if I want to subtract, I'll hold Alt to subtract it. How to make the shape exactly as I want it to be. Adding more. Subtracting. That's the special thing about the lasso tool. It's very freestyle. It allows me to create shapes freely. Besides that, within the lasso tool, if I hold down this arrow and drag it out, it has a quite interesting tool. That's the polygonal lasso tool. Polygonal means it will create rigid shapes. I can create rigid shapes like this. It's suitable for drawing objects that don't have a natural characteristic, like clouds, trees, but with a rigid nature. For example, rocks or drawing eyebrows. They use the polygonal lasso tool to draw. It's more flexible that way. Or I can also combine, for example, this area is curved. I can use the lasso tool to adding this curve. I flexibly use the tools together, or I can switch to the marquee tool to add something else. It's very comfortable. I have to be flexible in using them to achieve results. For example, here as well. If it's round, using the ellipse tool is the best, right? To create the shape of this round hat. Then I can draw on it. Very flexible indeed. I've mentioned two tools. Polygonal lasso tool and the lasso tool. They have a similar characteristic of providing more freedom in drawing. The marquee tool only draws fixed geometric shapes. And the lasso tool. It's a bit more complex, but in return, it's a quite powerful tool because it helps me draw the best possible outline. That tool is the pen tool. It's down here. It has the shortcut key P. Look for the one with the letter P here, the pen tool. It has the letter P, pen tool. When using the pen tool, it creates shapes like this. For example, to draw these paths, I place a point. If I drag it out, it creates a pen curve, a tangent line, to create beautiful curves. And I draw closely following the shape I want. As I move to this last point, it places a circle right at the cursor position. Clicking on it will finalize a pen tool shape. And this object will transform into a selection. So I'll hold down the Ctrl-Alt keys. Then it will create selection areas. Now I'll press Ctrl-Z. So what are the strengths of the pen tool? It can change shapes. You can see here below. There are many shape changing tools. When I finish creating, I hover over it and I also see the tool, and on this side, the operations I can perform on it. For example, this pen tool, I have it set as path. It also has shape. What is shape? Shape is when I create it like this. It creates a closed shape. Like this, for better visibility, depending on what I want. I prefer path. For example, I create any path. These curves can be stretched more or less to create curved shapes according to my desired shape. For example, like this. After creating the shape, the pen tool's strength is that I can add or subtract. For example, I add it here. It's marked with plus, is the plus for adding, right? But if I keep the pen tool, I just leave the mouse cursor there, without doing anything, without clicking anything. For example, no matter what I click, it will still appear down here. Don't worry. I press P to switch to the pen tool. You see, when I hover over it, I click on it and it will disappear. Ctrl-Z. If I hover over here, it has plus to add something extra. If I hold the Alt key, if I hover inside this shape, it will create an anchor point that can be moved. It can be moved like this, but if I want to move these points, what should I do? You see, here it has a white mouse cursor. It's called the direct selection tool, the white mouse cursor. The mouse cursor is black. Or in this section, the mouse cursor is black, with the shape of the move tool. But now, when I hover over here, I have a white mouse cursor. What is the purpose of this white mouse cursor? When I click on a specific point, you see, the remaining points turn white. Only that point remains dark. I click this point becomes dark, the rest turns white. When I click, I can easily move that point. To make the shape as beautiful as possible, I can move it. I can still select these anchor points to stretch them out. It's quite interesting, or hold Alt, so that I can individually bend each curve point. You see, I bend them separately, but normally when I release Alt, then I couldn't bend them separately. For example, any point here, I couldn't bend it separately. When I bend on one side, the other side follows. But with the Alt key earlier, I already bent it, so it's separated. For example, I select a new one. This point doesn't have an anchor point. It doesn't have a tangent because I didn't create one. Like this point, here it is. I bend it. When I hold down the Alt key, it will automatically bend each side. You see, the pen tool may seem a bit complex, but as I mentioned before, it also revolves around the Shift, Ctrl, Alt keys. Let me remind you once again about the pen tool. For example, now I'll create this cloud shape. I click on this point, then click on the curved point in the middle. Then click on the final curved point. This upper curved point, the final curved point. There will be 3 points, the peak and 2 points as the base. Then I can easily modify it. And if I make a mistake, I can press Ctrl-Z. And when creating a point, I hold down the space bar. Just created it and still holding the space bar. The mouse cursor hasn't lifted off the canvas yet. In that case, I can still move it around. Now I release the space bar. Same with this side. I create. In this area, if I create on top of it, it won't work. It will become distorted, because this area has an anchor point. So how can I remove it? I'll remove it. Hold Alt, click on it. I'll remove this, Ctrl-Z. I'll do it again. Hold Alt and place it on that point. Click on it. It will remove this corner, and then it will return to a normal path. Like this, I create a curve. I want to cut it, Alt, click to cut it. Then I can create shapes more quickly. I will create things like a bunch, etc. And I press Ctrl Enter to create a selection area. Like this. Okay. That's what I want to share with you in selection, creating a selection lesson. Because selection is one of the most important things for you to be able to draw sharp images and to draw precise shapes. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.
Please like and subscribe to our channel.